let's watch the Baldur's Gate 3 video.
Is taking the internet by storm. At its peak, a whopping...
So, let's just remind ourselves that it's... And I made a post about this on a Twitter thing. And I basically said... Well, the post said, game developers are panicking because Baldur's Gate is so good. And I made the post saying, what? Gosh, it's almost like a game with a good standard and a game with actual gameplay is making game developers who put out nothing but low effort, live service, microtransaction infused shite are now realizing that they actually need to put effort into their games, which has been which used to be the standard, and now is being re-revealed to be actually what the standard should be, rather than microtransaction-filled, low-effort, poorly optimized live service nonsense.
800,000 plus concurrent players were playing this weekend, catapulting it to the number 8 most played of all time spot. The gaming community has sung its praises, and it's incredibly refreshing to play a feature-complete game of this caliber on day one.
And he's not even wrong either. Like, I could not really... So I've put about, what, 12 hours in so far? Sure, I'm not very far by comparison to most people, but I've not encountered a single lag issue. I've not encountered any bugs for the most part. The game is well refined. It's got a great story that you can follow. I mean, it's as typical... Like, it's D&D. It's fucking D&D in its finest. Like, the game feels good, and it feels like it was polished. Which is what games should be. And the fact that... And I mentioned this earlier, but it's literally... The fact that people are so shocked at this really goes to show how good the AAA developers have gotten at conditioning people to believe that games that are badly optimized, filled with microtransactions, and just nothing but cash grabs are the standard. And the fact that that has been conditioned into people's brains, that is the baseline of what you can get, just baffles me. And the fact that this is now happening, I'm hoping this is the start of, like, the simple fact is, indie studios and AA studios are the ones who have set the precedent. And we just haven't had a AAA developer that's put the time and effort into making a game that isn't just a cash grab for such a long time now. I mean, lest we remind ourselves about Halo Infinite or any of the other live service nonsense that's come out in the last several years. And now people are shocked to think that, well, gosh, maybe we can play games and not have our wallets squeezed for every penny.
AAA game developers want you to know that
perfect?
This is
No, not at all.
rockstar level nonsense for scope, that it's foolhardy to set expectations higher, and Baldur's Gate 3 should not be used as a raised standard to RPGs going forward. Why was the...
It's not a raised standard. It is the standard. Like, for those who don't remember, like, back in 2015, really 2012, 2013 was like the god era of gaming. This is back before people realized the live service was basically an easy way of making cheap money. This is back when developers basically had to make a good game to get people's attention. It was only really in 2015, 2016 when these developers started realizing, hey, we can just pump out some content, patch it later, and fill it in later. Blizzard. And they would be able to just dump on a battle pass or some microtransactions and just expect that it would go well. But now Baldur's Gate has just opened people's minds up to the fact that and kind of reminded them. Like, because you know what developers were trying to do? They were trying to make live service games so ingrained in gaming society that eventually people would forget what games used to be like, that this was the norm, and that no one would dare tread... Because what they were hoping was that no game developer would do this again to remind people what games used to be. They would hope that they would do this long enough to make an entire new generation of gamers believe that this is how things are per the norm. That this is how games have always been. And now that we finally had a game, in this case Baldur's Gate 3, show that you can have a polished game. I mean, God of War. God of War was another good example. Every now and again, we get a brilliant example of a polished game that doesn't need microtransactions, doesn't need a live service model, doesn't need to be always online, that you can just play for the gameplay and have fun with it. And I honestly do believe that we are entering a renaissance period where people are now protesting with their wallets, with things like Blizzard and their Overwatch fiasco. All these, like, people are finally, I think, getting fed up of the nonsense. People are now demanding quality rather than quantity. And maybe, just maybe, you know, we're not going to see much change from companies like EA. Like, you're not going to stop EA from pumping out Call of Duty every year and pumping it full of microtransactions to make you buy the same shit you bought 1 year ago, or whatever else. But maybe, just maybe, we might start seeing an influx of better polished games. Who knows? Maybe we'll even get a Halo that doesn't suck. Who knows? Maybe we'll even finally get games on the Xbox and PlayStation 5. Okay, you know what? One of those things might be true. We're never getting games on the PlayStation 5.
The first response to defend the current state of AAA gaming, as opposed to saying, hey, maybe we can learn a thing or two from Baldur's Gate 3 and make our game better for our customers. This all kicked off way back on July 8th, a lifetime ago by internet standards, I know, when a writer and BAFTA nominee, Xavier Nelson, took to Twitter to express concerns about Baldur's Gate 3.
Actually, do you remember when Elden Ring came out? I love when a game comes out that is critically acclaimed as being godly, and all of a sudden, other game developers who are from opposing studios will start posting slanderous messages about that game because they're jealous that their microtransaction, poorly optimized shithole of a game couldn't hold a candle to it. Like, you guys remember when Elden Ring came out and the people who made Horizon Zero Dawn were shit-talking it because it was good, and they didn't understand why their game failed when Elden Ring succeeded? The fact that they brought out a game that didn't need to hold your hand and basically treat you like a little baby. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Baldur's Gate comes out, other game developers who are jealous are like, oh, it's terrible, it's bad. Please help stroke my fickle ego and give us validation that we're not bad. We're just doing what we need to do to make money. I'm sorry. That's not the way it works. That to me is the sign of a fickle game developer that doesn't understand the concept of what their audience actually wants.
3, namely that fans would use Baldur's Gate 3 to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. My rebuttal is, why shouldn't customers have raised standards? Taking it a step further, why shouldn't some AAA developers raise their own standards? Are we really going to pretend that consumers shouldn't be?
I hate the term that they're using, the raised standard. A lot of these developers who are angry that Baldur's Gate is so good, they're using terminology like raised standard, and then they're going to try and make the consumer feel guilty that Baldur's Gate is setting the standard too high and that it's going to negatively affect their games. No, that's not how it is, and he's probably going to say this in a minute, I'd imagine. The raised standard is not a raised standard, it's a re-acclimatization of where the standard should be. It is the standard that should be expected of all game developers. And they're just upset that they actually have to put work in now. They're upset that a game has proven that their microtransaction nonsense is just slop. Absolute slop.
Little upset right now and hoping for an improvement in the industry going forward.
You don't have to make something
Rockstar
as good as Baldur's Gate. Just make sure
remake,
it's as polished as Baldur's
conversion
Gate. Like,
of the original
no one's
Red Dead
asking
Redemption.
you to make a fucking 700-hour game that perpetuates with multiple playthroughs. We're just asking that you don't make something that's tripe. We're asking that you just make something that isn't slop. That isn't a money grab, that isn't just a cash grab, that doesn't, like, it's about respecting the audience. It's about respecting the time investment. It's respecting your customer's money and respecting that your customer needs to have an experience before they, because if you, it's simple chemistry. It's simple chemistry. Let me bring this up. You want money. Money. M for money. M for money, guys. M for money. It's simple. You want money. So you make product. But to get product, you need an audience. Now, sure, you can put out a game that catches the audience's attention. So G for game. But if that game doesn't respect the audience and all of a sudden that audience becomes disheartened and doesn't care about your product anymore, if the audience has no faith in what you do, surprisingly, when you decide to repeat this process for a sequel or a second game, all of a sudden this money also gets removed. And because you don't have money, you can't make a better product. And because you can't make a better product, you lose your audience. And because you have no audience, you can't make games anymore. It's simple maths, my dudes. And the fact that these guys don't realize this is ridiculous.
For the PlayStation 4 and Switch.
Actually, you know what? No, I lie. They do know this. They just don't care. All they care about is filling their wallets and making sure that the CEOs can afford another yacht for the air. Bobby Kotick's 5th yacht. Guys, you've got to feel sorry for the CEOs. COVID has been hard. Like, Bobby Kotick and Jeff Bezos, they can't afford their $5 million mansion anymore. Oh, can we get F's in the chat? Won't somebody think of the poor, poor billionaires?
Mention of a 4K update, no mention of 60 FPS, and no mention of multiplayer support. The game came out 13 years ago, and the Xbox port...
You know what? Actually, I would say Red Dead Redemption was the... like, Red Dead... Okay, there are a few games that are of that standard that are that basically exemplify the standard that games should be aiming for. Not just in terms of again, we're not asking that games that all developers put out a 500-hour epic. We're not. But we're talking about polish. We're talking God of War. That of boy, if you will. We're talking Baldur's Gate. Like, when you think of these games, you think, how was my experience when I first played? How was its experience on launch? Thinking of Devil May Cry, DMC. Like, none of these games, realistic, like, again, we're not saying they were perfect. We're not. Oh, Spider-Man Morales, that's a good one. Yeah. None of these games are definitely not perfect. And of course, not everyone's going to like them because they're very niche. Games are. That's just how they do. But when you say these names, when you think about your first experience playing these games, did you have microtransactions? No. Did you have polish? Was it stable when it launched? Yes. And because of that, your experience was better. You have faith in the developer. You enjoyed what you played. Ergo, you have trust in what the developers put out next is going to be good. So you're more likely to buy what they put out. The big problem, and I've always said this, the big problem that these developers have is that they're trying to milk a small, like, they don't care about the mass audience. All they care about is having the whales. All they care about is milking the people with excess amounts of money. But in reality, gaming needs quantity of players. You need people. You need more people, not a smaller audience that just has more money. It's like, it's the World of Warcraft scenario. Blizzard don't care about their audience. If they really cared about World of Warcraft, they would make it free to play to get asses in seats. It's the same with Twitch. It's the same with a lot of things. You need asses in seats to have an audience. And it goes back to that thing that I showed earlier. You need asses in seats to have an audience. If you have an audience, there'll be more people to take your product in. But the ones who only care about the live service scenario, all they care about is keeping the ones who are willing to pay absurd amounts of money to get their experience. And then they ostracize those who either don't have the money or just don't care for putting up with that nonsense. And then it's a perpetuating cycle of you make bad... It's this horrible circle. Bad decision, smaller audience. Smaller audience leads to more bad decisions, because then these developers will then make more bad decisions to milk the smaller audience they have. They're trying to make more money per capita of an audience. So because they do that, they lose their audience again. And then they make another bad decision to try and milk more. But what they don't seem to care or understand is that you need to have an audience to make money. And eventually, you'll ostracize so much of your community that you won't have enough people to even make money from in the end. And eventually, it perpetuates to a point where even the whales won't be enough to keep your game afloat. I mean, again, we need only look at World of Warcraft at that point.
Everything they're offering, and then some for free with your 360 copy. Go buy a brand new copy of the Game of the Year edition on Amazon right now for $30, and you're good to go. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, when released on PC, had furious fans citing numerous problems getting the game to run, frequent crashes, and similar problems.
This was a shame because this could, like, the game was great, and not to spoil anything, up until the end. And I love Jedi, I love Jedi Survive, I loved Jedi The Fallen Order. And now it's fine. It's just one of those things of this could have been the exemplar of Baldur's Gate. I just
5 and Xbox. EA apologized and is still working.
I mean, guys, this year has been like these last 2 years have been an entire almost a smorgasbord of AAA developers apologizing for their slop. Lest we forget Gollum. Ugh.
To fix the issues. Destiny 2 just released a State of the Game blog saying, amongst other things, that they don't have the resources to release new ritual armor every season. But that same studio manages to create new armor sets in the shop for...
See what I mean? The priorities. This right here, this tells you that the priority is that they only care about taking your money. They don't care about making content, they just care about taking your money.
For up to $20 a pop without fail every season. Diablo 4 unabashedly has several character skins priced at $20 each and just released their
did you
first
expect
season that
anything
had a patch
else
that
after
was
seeing what Diablo
so
Immortal
poorly
was
thought
like?
out that the
fact that people bamboozled themselves into thinking that Diablo 4 was going to be any better than Diablo Immortal baffles me. It's fucking Blizzard. Diablo Immortal was just a way for them to gauge what they could get away with.
Have an emergency live stream to apologize and have since begun working to revert those changes.
We don't plan on doing a patch like this.
This was so funny. This was so funny. Literally, they had to get on streams to do an emergency broadcast to apologize for the way they were treating the game for monetization. And there was a thing in this where for you when you would go to press the play button, it would be right next to the battle pass. And for a lot of people that didn't have two-factor authentication, if you pressed the play button, it would instantaneously buy you the battle pass without even authorization. Talk about shit. Again, Blizzard. It's the same names every time that have set this horrendous standard.
Ever again.
Okay, you need a more comparable RPG example of why fans are heralding Baldur's Gate 3 as a breath of fresh air. Look no further than Mass Effect Andromeda, which was widely panned.
Sorry,
Slop.
my face is tired.
Absolute slop. Looks like a goddamn Barbie doll, and I'm sorry, this game came out at a time that the friggin' Mass Effect 3 looked better than this game.
Everything.
Or Cyberpunk 2077 that made promises about last-gen game consoles that it couldn't keep.
I mean, Cyberpunk now is a good game. It's just, it should have been that good on launch.
It took CDPR almost a year to get that all sorted out. I'll make this as clear as possible to contextualize how fans are feeling. It feels like money.
And to be fair, on Cyberpunk's defense, it wasn't the developers that forced the game out too early. It was the publishers. CD Projekt Red didn't want to release it necessarily at the time they did, but they were getting major pressure from their publishers and their backers to push it out early, to push it out sooner rather than later. They wanted to delay it more, as far as I'm aware. So sometimes it's not always the developers that's the problem, it's just the publishers. And what you tend to find is that the studios that tend to do worse with this are the ones who are self-publishing.
has become
Hey, Showscope, thanks for the resub.
more important than the core experience for fans. That's why
Yeah,
Elden
when
Ring,
shareholders
Baldur's
make the
Gate
decision,
3, and even The Legend of Zelda
just-
Tears
it
of the
just tanks.
Kingdom
It just
are
tanks.
being widely celebrated.
Yes, see what I mean? Elden Ring. You know what? I've completely forgot. Tears of the Kingdom. Great game. Absolutely phenomenal game. I know I haven't played it that much, but again, there are great examples of games that have had lots of effort put into them. Again, they're not perfect. They're never going to be, but they are showing you that games can be focused on the game and not about making money. And because here's the thing, if the game is good, people play it. If people enjoy it, they tell their friends they enjoyed it. Because okay, how many of you wait to see other people's impression on something before you buy it? Because ever since like the days of Anthem, I no longer buy a game, usually, until I see if other people have liked it. So if the game is shit on launch and it actualizes your opinion that it was going to be bad, no surprise, you're not going to buy it. So this is why it's super important to make a good first impression. Because if your first impression is good, people see that it's good, and the people that were on the fence about buying it, buy it. And that's how you get asses in seats.
So what is up with the excuses? A game came along that is amazing, is selling well, is being praised by developers and fans alike, and the response is, well, we can't do that. Well, sweet. If that doesn't get me hyped for Mass Effect 4,
Excuses!
I don't know what will. Xavier's tweet was well-intentioned, and he went on to add a lot of important context, but I think it misses the perspective of the consumer.
Okay, let's just read this a second. Let's just read this real quick. You can't separate a game from the process used to build it, so let's look at what the Larian is taking in development, the version of this game. Dev cycle stretching back to 2017, 2 massive games and their definitive editions worth of tech and institution knowledge to draw from.
You inspire your men to study such foul smut, Commissar? You heretic!
Detestable mutants fill your heads with such vile obscenity! Die, heretic!
This isn't heresy! Actually, this is. Yeah, no, this is. But we're not, it's not, us reviewing it is not heresy. This is merely us trying to understand why these people fucking suck dick. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs, though. Thank you. What this is an excuse. And if your excuse is that you simply can't do it because it's unfeasible, well, that says something more about your business's environment of production. This, to me, says that your studio is not giving you an environment that gives you room to make your games successfully. You can't sit there and say, well, we don't have time. Like, the reason why our games are live services so that we can prop it up. Well, that entails that there's more of a, what's the word? Oh god, brain fart. There's more of an internalized, enigmatic? No, not enigmatic. Brain fart. I had the word, now I've completely lost it. Either way, it's more like there's a... This is something that is ingrained in the studio. And that, to me, says that you need to change the environment of your studio and to understand that to make a game that people actually... Because there's a difference between a game that's successful and a game that's financially successful. You want a game that people enjoy. Because otherwise we go back to that thing that I talked about earlier. With the whole, people enjoying the game to be able to get other people to enjoy it themselves. But if you release a game and it's financially successful, but people fucking hate it, then you've lost the faith in your audience. Sure, you've made a short-term gain. You might have made a lot of money in the short term, but no one's going to buy anything else from you in the future. And for you to propagate a successful business model, you need the continuing support of your audience, not just a one-time investment. It's not healthy. And if this is your excuse for that, you need to change the institutionalized mentality of your studio. Adapt and overcome and innovate. The inability to do that shows the inability to care and empathize with your audience. And that is what turns most people off.
important context.
Thanks
But I
for the
think
reset,
it
by the way.
misses the perspective of the consumer. We don't know anything about game design or how hard it is. We
Also,
just know that
T-Man,
Destiny is
thank you so
deleting
much for 10
hundreds of
gifted subs.
dollars worth
I would
of
be a bit more
expansions
hyped,
when
but
they
we're,
feel like it. That
I'm
Diablo is
recording this
constantly
for
reminding
YouTube,
us
so.
to buy skins in their store.
React
and
Andy
most
content!
PC ports have been abysmal lately. Remember, that tweet was made nearly a month before Baldur's Gate 3 blew
Oh,
up.
don't even get me started on ports. Ports are such a sloppy way of just trying to make a bit of extra money. Like, oh boy, people want to play this on console. Let's just haphazardly dump it onto a different format and hope people buy it. Just the cheapest, laziest way of making extra cash.
And it was still contentious with fans speaking up about their frustrations and developers chiming in to say what felt like game development
Oh no,
is
exactly,
hard.
bud. It's
You
just
don't
excuse
get
on
it.
top of excuse.
Be quiet.
They're
Baldur's-
trying to validate their shit opinion. They're trying to validate their shit ideology. And they're trying to validate why you, the customer, are wrong. Sometimes the customer can be wrong, but in situations of their enjoyment, the customer is never wrong in what they enjoy. And if you're putting out low-effort garbage, they are not wrong in calling you out on low-effort garbage.
Baldur's Gate 3 is a game from a large, passionate studio that refuses to add microtransactions, gave players early access so they could address any problems that arose before launch, and is taking Steam charts by storm.
What I love about
So
Baldur's
why
Gate
should
is there's no
fans
filter
not
either.
use that as a gold standard
They-
of how
they-
to
they
do
don't
it right?
care about
And why would a
messages, they don't
AAA
care
studio
about,
not look at it and say, hey,
like,
maybe cramming
pandering to a
microtransactions
demographic?
into our game
It is
isn't a good look?
unfiltered,
When
raw
Mass Effect 4
content.
comes out, I don't want to see a $20
it's great.
Liara skin. And I hope that its performance is tested across all platforms before release.
Hi, Emrys.
Am I
Thank
in
you
the
for following.
wrong for not wanting
That's okay, good to see you. What's
microtransactions
up?
in a stable video game at launch? Credit where credit's due now. There have been some really good examples of AAA games like the Dead Space remake and the Resident Evil 4
Oh.
remake come to mind, both of which have been
Oh.
massive successes.
Leon, sexual, Kennedy, yes!
For EA and Capcom. Vampire Survivors came along and took the internet by storm last year. Do I need to bring up Elden Ring again? But that tweet blew up in the development sphere, and frankly, the pushback is just ridiculous. Developers should be looking at what Baldur's Gate 3 did and trying to replicate where they can, not jumping up to defend games that are cramming in practices that fans are getting fed up with.
I get it, and I understand. You are not expected to make a Baldur's Gate. A developer is just expected to have that standard and polish. You are just expected to put out something that isn't slop. You are expected to put out something that respects the audience and their time and their investment in your game. Respect the audience, and the audience will respect you. Which is something most AAA studios don't do anymore. And some indie studios. Digital Extremes, what?
And make no mistake about it, these decisions impact game design. Many games are utilizing battle passes and player engagement as a metric of success. For a player, that means more grindy missions. That means more reminders to stop in the shop. It means a boring grind because
How many of you get pissed off when you play a game like on mobile? Like, we're not talking about mobile games. Mobile games, you have that expectation that they're gonna try and suck your money dry. That is just how mobile games are these days. But for AAA developed games, for consoles and PC, the fact that sometimes with some of these games you get reminders mid-game to use the cash shop baffles me. Like, I wanted a game, not a goddamn Super Bowl advertisement. Shit, man.
keeping players engaged is a key metric. Many of the people who came out to
I
talk
think
about
battle
why Baldur's
passes
Gate
are the
3
biggest
shouldn't be the new standard have since walked
excuse
back those statements, and I'm glad.
And
because
biggest red herring of a game. Like, battle passes are... I'm gonna say it. Battle passes are pretentious, insidious, and deceptive. Even free battle passes predate on addictive tendencies and people's inability to understand their self-control. I wish battle passes had never been existed. Like, it predates people's FOMO, and it's predatory to people's addictive tendencies. I understand the concept behind battle passes and why you would want one, especially for a live service, and in certain situations they're better than others, but a battle pass is never a good solution to content. A battle pass is never equivalent to gameplay. For certain situations, it can be better. It can be more acceptable. Like, say, for example, in an MMO where the gameplay loop is never ending. It's like doing daily quests. But at that point, you could just develop the game to have a better gameplay loop rather than relying on a simple system that requires little to no effort and pushes people's constant engagement.
If the industry can't take a good hard look at what's going wrong, why fans reacted the way they did to Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, and then make impactful changes, we're screwed. Also, people seem to be using the fact that Larian is a big studio against them, the fact that they had a long development cycle against them. Really? Blizzard is also a huge studio with over 8,500 employees across...
Oh, dude, I love the fact that Blizzard have become the standard of what's shit these days. Like, EA does some nonsense, other studios do some nonsense, Ubisoft is shit sometimes, but Blizzard has a crown literally made of dookie on their head.
Several offices. They credited every employee at Blizzard in the release of Diablo 4. Bungie is a huge studio with over 1,552 employees across several offices. BioWare is a huge studio with over 500 employees across several offices. And Larian is also a large studio with over 400 employees across several offices. All of them have established beloved IPs with a ton of lore to pull from. All of them have a lot of money to make video games. And all of them had a long time to make anything.
So I've used this analogy before, but I'll use it again. A game studio, it's a game going from start to finish often comes down to how many cogs there are to be turning. Like, the bigger a studio is, a lot of the time games will end up becoming bad because there's just too many cogs in the system to try and work with. Like a game that, like, a studio that understands game development will have as streamlined of a process to get from start to end as possible. The reason why you find companies like EA, Ubisoft tend to go so wrong is because you have stockholders, friggin' the higher ups who only care about money. They don't care about the smoothness of how it gets from start to finish. Because the longer you spend between the start and the end going through different systems, the more points of contention and the more points of failure you're going to have. Each one of these little corners is something where another decision and another system or another faculty has had to get involved to help rectify decisions. If you don't make the process go through you have to make the process of game development as simple as possible. You cannot have a billion different systems, a billion different faculties, a billion different cogs to churn through, because inevitably these cogs are going to gunk up. You're going to have too many hands. Like, the most simple term is too many cooks in the kitchen. You can't have that. You have to make the process simple. You have to let the developers develop their game.
They wanted to make. To say Baldur's Gate 3 is successful because it's aligned with Dungeons & Dragons is insanity. You think 800,000 Steam players are playing a game called Baldur's Gate 3 because of Dungeons & Dragons? No.
There aren't that many Dungeons & Dragons players in the world. I'm sorry.
It's clearly gone far beyond that audience. I don't know anything about Dungeons & Dragons. I didn't know this game had anything to do with Dungeons & Dragons. And you know why I'm playing it? Because I like good games with a heavy focus on storytelling.
Fair, you know what I mean, right?
But anyway, it wasn't all doom and gloom from the development side. Thank you, Juno Bleeze, formerly Arrived, for jumping in and echoing exactly what I'm saying here.
Dungeons & Dragons
quote
fan base.
Reads, succeeds. I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, it absolutely raises industry and genre standards regardless of why and how. We should look at the Larian success story and ask ourselves, how are we going to make our games better and create the next games that shake up the industry? Players should and must always expect more from us,
exactly
never
what we've been
less.
saying.
Thank you. I implore
Yeah,
AAA
shocker,
devs to
and
look at these games
TLDR,
that are being
people
celebrated and look at
like
your pipeline
good
to see why the
games.
consumer is getting frustrated about the
Wow.
experience I outline in this video.
would have thought?
And obviously try and make an improvement. Because telling me how hard it is when you're breaking profit and revenue records isn't a super compelling argument from the customer's perspective. Is Baldur's Gate 3 an outlier? Yes, but I for one wish it could become the standard, and being told to shut up because I don't know game design doesn't feel super constructive. But hey,
When a game developer tells you to shut up because you don't understand game design, that's A, cope, and B, highly disrespectful of your audience. Audience knows what's shit. Audience knows when shit stinks. Sure, they may not know game development, but they know when shit stinks.
I'm just some idiot on the internet who doesn't know anything about game design. I guess I'll just go buy my horse armor and call it a day. Enjoy your $20 on top of your $100 for the collector's edition on top of your $15 for the battle pass.
Bethesda, what?
What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, because I get why you're frustrated.
Okay.
And if
That was a video and a half. Yeah, no, I agree with almost everything this guy says, and it's entirely true. I mean, we've had a very critical discussion about this, but you know, I hope this is the beginning of a new era for gaming. Like, we are slowly seeing we are seeing an increase in better produced games now, which is great. So hopefully, I mean, I don't think we're ever gonna completely get rid of trashy cash grab games, because you know, people will always just try and take the path of least resistance. But what I'm hoping is we're starting to get into a period now where the stockholders and the people who have the money understand that games have to respect the audience rather than just to suck them dry. Anyway, if you guys are watching this on the YouTube, by the way, please keep in mind that this actually might be the last React Andy that I upload to the YouTube. And I know I've said this, but I've actually now made a separate YouTube channel for VODs and React Andy content. There will be a link to that down below, and from this video onwards, you'll be seeing constructive, scripted content that I make from here on in. So I'll very likely be making an update video specifically for the main channel to explain what the purpose of the main channel is. But if you are watching this on this YouTube, just keep in mind this is the last video you're going to see. I just thought I'd make this because, you know, it's a very relevant subject. It's a subject I'm passionate about, and advertisement and viewership, and to prove that I'm not dead, even though I am still in the donathon, and I've been saying that this would end for the last 2 months. Anyway, go check out the new channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!